Army has continued its attacks on the FARC rebels, killing 5 and demonstrating no will to a bilateral ceasefire as peace talks continue in Havana.
A commander of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia was killed by a new military attack. Earlier this month, 26 FARC rebels were killed in military strikes, prompting the leftist guerrilla to cancel its unilateral ceasefire. The FARC halted its military operations 5 months ago and called the government to do the same, but President Juan Manuel Santos has refused to do so.
The peace talks need a strong boost, and this can only happen with a bilateral ceasefire.
In Havana, the Colombian government announced that it will begin a special peace education program called Lectures for Peace, which would be implemented in schools and universities within next months. The program aims at preparing the population for the end of decades-old conflict by debunking myths and hatred towards different ideologies and groups.
We go now to our correspondent in Colombia, as concerns have been raised due to renewed confrontations between the army and the FARC guerrilla.
Terror, uncertainty, and fear. That's how the head of Colombia's indigenous organization, Luis Arias, describes the mood among the rural population following the increase of army airstrikes and the suspension of the FARC's unilateral ceasefire, an escalation of the conflict that he believes only benefits the enemies of the peace process.
Here, the ones calling for war are not the ones sending their children to war, but rather this is a war being fought by the poor and the impoverished. That is why we are calling on the whole Colombian population to raise awareness on the issue of war and to mobilize in favor of peace, in favor of silencing the rifles.
And as the continued airstrikes by the army have left another 10 FARC guerrillas dead, the Colombian citizens continue to suffer the harshness of warfare. At least 352 residents from the rural areas of Cauca-troubled state have been forced to flee their homes, as confirmed by the local ombudsman.
There is a strong offensive against campesino, indigenous, and Afro-descendant communities. The airstrikes, the machine gunning, and in general all the military escalation is damaging our communities. We are strongly demanding the civilian population to be respected.
The conflict escalation comes as the FARC's unilateral ceasefire was entering its 6th month, and a relative calm was beginning to be felt in Colombia's countryside. Now the residents of these areas continue to call for a bilateral ceasefire, which for them is a necessity rather than a whim.
Those living in the cities think that the war zones are not those zones where the campesinos are. That is not the case. The war zone is right where the campesinos transit, where they cultivate, where they milk the cows. So the damages are all over their surroundings.
And if the bombs were falling on your house? This is the question displayed on these signs that peace advocates have been placing all around Bogotá in an attempt to raise awareness on the impacts that airstrikes and in general armed confrontation have over the lives of rural residents in Colombia. Natalia Margarita, Telesur, Bogotá.